but also inviting the President and the First Lady to make a state visit to the United Kingdom. An unprecedented second state visit. This has never happened before. It's so incredible, it will be historic. And I'm delighted that I can go back to His Majesty the King and tell him that President Trump has accepted the invitation. So thank you. Our teams will now work together to set a date, and we look forward to welcome you in the United Kingdom. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much. What a beautiful accent. I would have been president 20 years ago if I had that accent. Thank you very much. Okay, let's see here. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Earlier today, you told me that you believe that foreign countries pay tariffs, but Americans who are concerned about higher prices believe, as most people do, that they're paid by consumers and importers when they import things into this country. Can you explain how you came to this belief that foreign governments are paying tariffs? And for the Prime Minister, did you discuss with President Trump his repeated statements of desire to annex Canada? And has the King expressed any concern over the President's apparent desire to remove one of his realms from his control?
So I'll go ahead. The first part, the tariffs are necessary because we've been treated very unfairly by many, many countries, including our friends, friend and foe. But we've been treated very unfairly in trade at levels that nobody's really ever seen before, and especially under the Biden administration, they really took advantage of the United States. I put massive tariffs on China during my 4 years. We had the best economy in the history of our country. Probably the best economy, maybe the best economy in the history of the world. To even things up, hundreds of billions of dollars, and we had no inflation. And it's a myth. It's a myth that's put out there by foreign countries that really don't like paying tariffs. We've been treated badly by a lot. We're using tariffs. And I find, and you just have to look at the numbers, but I find that it's not about inflation, it's about fairness, and the inflation for us has not existed, and I don't think it's going to exist. We're going to bring our car industry back, we're going to bring our chips back, we're going to bring so many things back to our country, including pharmaceuticals and drugs, and the thing that's going to get us there is tariffs. And really don't like paying tariffs, and especially to even up. So we've been treated badly by a lot. We're using tariffs, but I find that it's not about inflation. It's about fairness, and the inflation for us has not existed, and I don't think it's going to exist. We're going to bring our car industry back. We're going to bring our chips back. We're going to bring so many things back to our country, including pharmaceuticals and drugs. And the thing that's going to get us there is tariffs. And I say often, it's my favorite word in the dictionary, but I always preface that by saying now, because I got into a lot of trouble with the fake news where they say that's not good. So I say God, love, family, wife, they're all my favorite words. But tariff is about number 4 or 5 on the list. But I will tell you, it's going to make our country rich, and it's going to stop us from being a laughingstock all over the world because we have been taken advantage of like no country has ever been taken advantage of. Thank you very much. And
look, we had a really good discussion, a productive discussion, a good discussion, as a result of which our teams are now going to be working together on an economic deal. Our teams are going to be working together on security in Ukraine. You mentioned Canada. I think you're trying to find a divide between us that doesn't exist. We're the closest of nations, and we had very good discussions today, but we didn't discuss Canada.
Thank you. Please. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yes. Thank you.
Hi, Natasha Clark from
Hi.
LBC. Mr. President, you've said you're working on a new trade deal with Britain, which we of course welcome. President Obama once said Britain was at the back of the queue for that trade deal. Where are we now? When do you think we're going to see that? And Prime Minister, the BBC has today admitted serious flaws over the recent Gaza coverage, suggestions of payments made to people linked to Hamas. Does the BBC still have your trust? Thank you.
Well, they didn't do well with President Obama. He'd never got a lot of things done, and he didn't get a trade deal done that was of any importance or magnitude. We've had great discussions on trade, and I think we're going to have a deal done rather quickly as it can be done. We're going to have something, I think, rather quickly. We expect to do that. Okay? Please.
On the BBC, look, I've been concerned about the programme in question. The Secretary of State had a meeting with the BBC. I think it was yesterday, it could have been the day before. Thank you.
Jeff, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Pardon me. Mr. President, do you support Article 5 of the NATO treaty? And are you concerned that it might be triggered if European peacekeeping forces end up in Ukraine?
I support it. I don't think we're going to have any reason for it. I think we're going to have a very successful peace, and I think it's going to be a long-lasting peace. And I think it's going to happen hopefully quickly. If it doesn't happen quickly, it may not happen at all. And we want it for two reasons. Number one, I want to see on a humane basis, I want to see soldiers stop getting shot, because largely it's soldiers now. Towns have been obliterated, but it's largely that. And I don't want to pay billions and billions and billions of dollars, nor does the Prime Minister or anybody else, on a senseless war that should have never happened. And we're going to get it taken care of. But I think it's going to be a peace that's going to be long-lasting. Do you have a question for the Prime Minister?
Thank you. Mr. Prime Minister, you were asking the President today about a backstop for Europe if the peacekeeping force ends up in Ukraine. Did you feel like you got a satisfying answer for yourself and for Europe? And Mr. President?
We'll be doing a substantial amount of work, probably about at least what we have in there, and we hope to be able to do that. You never know when it comes to that. You know, you dig and maybe things aren't there like you think they're there, but we'll be spending a lot of time there. It'll be great for Ukraine. It's like a huge economic development project, so it'll be good for both countries, okay? Please.
Prime Minister, excuse me, Prime Minister, you've talked about putting British soldiers' boots on the ground in Ukraine in the event that President Trump succeeds with his peace deal. But can you do that without a firm assurance that America will have our back in the form of some kind of security guarantee were Putin to breach that agreement? And Mr. President, tomorrow you're seeing President Zelensky to sign this deal on minerals and energy that could be hugely important to the United States. Will you take the opportunity to apologize to him for calling him a dictator while praising Vladimir Putin, who is a dictator?
Well, Robert, let me start by saying I've been really clear today and previously that I think that European countries, including the United Kingdom, need to step up in our own defence and security. We've been doing that in recent days. You saw the announcement we made on spending just the other day. In addition to that, I've made it clear that the United Kingdom will play its full part in ensuring that if there's a deal, and we hope there is a deal in Ukraine, that is a lasting deal that sticks. And we're obviously working with other European countries on that, France and NATO in particular. But I think I'm hosting 18 countries on Sunday to further our discussions. You heard from the President this morning that, you know, as historically has always been the case, we have each other's backs. And today we've been talking about the deal, how that will be a lasting deal. And coming out of this, our teams will now be talking in detail about that.
And I think we're going to have a very good meeting tomorrow, 11 o'clock. And I think we're going to have a very good meeting tomorrow morning. We're going to get along really well, okay? We have a lot of respect. I have a lot of respect for them. We've given them a lot of equipment and a lot of money, but they have fought very bravely, no matter how you figure it. They have really fought. Somebody has to use that equipment, and they have been very brave in that sense. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Ceasefire deal is nearing an end this Saturday, and there's been some worry that phase 2 might never get there. Do you believe that phase 2 of the ceasefire in Gaza will come to fruition? And have you spoken to Netanyahu about it? And for the Prime Minister, this peacekeeping deal has been pushed forward by the UK and France as well. Have you been in discussions with any other European countries to join this initiative? And are you expecting Commonwealth countries to also join the effort? Thank you.
So we're working very hard in the Middle East and Gaza and all of the problems, and it's been going on for years and years and centuries and centuries. It's a tough neighborhood, but it could be a very beautiful neighborhood, and I think we're going to come up with some pretty good solutions. But phase 1 is almost complete. We've had some people that have been very seriously injured, very seriously hurt, both physically and mentally. They've come out of there and some of them in very, very bad shape. It's shocking. Many young people aren't in bad shape. Young people are strong, healthy. They don't die. People have come out dead, young people and old people. It's a rough situation, but I think we're going to make it much better. And I think that we've had a huge impact on that since we've been in just the 4 weeks. I think we've had a huge impact on Gaza, the Middle East, and we have some pretty good talks going on concerning lots of other people that are going to make it better. So we'll see what happens. Nobody really knows, but we'll see what happens. But I think we've had a very positive impact. Prime Minister?
Yeah, on the question of the European countries, yes, I've spoken to a number of countries, particularly in the last few weeks. We had a meeting in Paris last week. I've got a meeting on Sunday with 18 countries to further our discussions. Obviously, we've been talking quite intensely to our French colleagues and to NATO, but to other countries as well, because, as I say, I think it's important for European countries, including the United Kingdom, to step up and do more in the defence and security of Europe and our continent and the United Kingdom, and we'll do so. Well, we're talking to a number of other countries.
Thank you. Yes, in the red, please. Pink red, flaming red.
Is it me or her?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. A question on Ukraine. Number one is, if you're not considering the security guarantees, are you open to other forms of, for example, intelligence cooperation with Ukraine? And Mr. Prime Minister, President Trump has proposed a plan for Gaza. Does this fit into the two-state solution that the UK held for a long time? Do you see it fit into your general Middle Eastern strategy? Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much. We're open to many things, but before I even think about that, that's almost pleasant to think about because that would mean that peace has been arrived at. We have to arrive at that peace. And, you know, you went 3.5 years with an administration that never even really had a meeting. They didn't have a meeting on peace. And there was no prospect of peace. I think, frankly, Russia wanted to go through the whole long deal. I don't think they do anymore. I don't think they do. We had a very big impact on that whole situation. But I don't like talking about phase 2 until I get phase 1. Phase 1 is I have to make peace. And we have to get Russia to agree. We have to get Ukraine to agree. And I think we will, I think we've come a long way. I believe we're going to get it done. I wouldn't say that if I didn't think so. And I think it will be very important, very historic, and we're going to save a lot of lives.
On the question of Gaza, the last few weeks of the ceasefire have been very impactful. And for me, there are two images that I remember more than any other. The first is Emily Damari, who is British, being reunited with her mother. You may remember she had her fingers missing after what she endured. That was an incredible moment. I'd spent a lot of time with her mother whilst she was held captive, and her mother went through absolute torture. The other image was thousands of Palestinians marching through rubble, trying to return to their communities and their homes. So we have to do everything we can to ensure that the ceasefire continues, so that more hostages can be returned, so that aid can be brought in that's desperately needed. We need to allow Palestinians to return and to rebuild their lives, and we must all support them in doing that. And yes, I believe that the two-state solution is ultimately the only way for a lasting peace in the region.
And think of that, she came home with her fingers and part of her hand blown off.
That's terrible.
How bad does it get? And we had others that came home in much worse shape than that.
Yeah.
It's a terrible situation. Please, yes.
Thank you. Mr. President, did our Prime Minister persuade you not to put tariffs on the UK? And if I may, Prime Minister, do you think that Vladimir Putin is a man who will keep his word? Thanks.
He tried. He was working hard, I'll tell you that. He earned whatever the hell they pay him over there. But he tried. I think there's a very good chance that in the case of these two great friendly countries, I think we could very well end up with a real trade deal where the tariffs wouldn't be necessary. We'll see. But he earned whatever they pay him. He earned today. He was working hard at lunch, and I'm very receptive to it. I think in all fairness, in all seriousness, I think we have a very good chance at arriving at a very good deal. JD and Scott and Howard, all the people are working on it, and I think we have a good chance at arriving at a deal that could be terrific, really terrific for both countries. Okay? Thank you.
On the second part of the question, I think my views on Putin are pretty well rehearsed and pretty well known. My concern is that if there's a deal, and I hope there is a deal, that it must be a lasting deal, that it's not a temporary measure. And that is why I think it's really important that Putin knows that this deal, a historic deal, which I very much hope comes about, is there, and it's a lasting deal, and that we're able to deal with any inclination he has to go again or go further.
I think we'll have two deals. I think we'll have a deal on ending the war, and I think we're going to end up with a great trade deal with you. And it's an honor to be with you, and I want to thank everybody very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, you've been listening to the latest joint news conference with President Trump, this time with Prime Minister Keir Starmer of Great Britain. They're discussing everything from Ukraine, the war there, tariffs and the economy, and so on. A lot to dive into. We should point out that our political director, Lindsay Keith, was inside the East Room there, listening there inside the room. She will now make her way out to the north lawn of the White House. And when she does that, gets all plugged in, we will go to her live. But in the meantime, we want to check in with geopolitical analyst and former advisor to the Bank of England, Roger Giewald is kind enough to join us from London today. Roger, thank you so much for being here. Your thoughts on what you just heard between the Prime Minister and our President?
And Donald Trump is just an amazing statesman and incredibly charming because, Keir Starmer and his government have said so many things that would make his blood boil. And are persisting with the dramatic, even drastic changes that they've made to the UK in the 7 or so months they've been in power, taking this country in a direction away from pretty much the rest of the Western world. This place has turned into a socialist country, many would say. Freedom of speech is, people are afraid to talk. And yet, Trump, who normally would grab something like that by the throat, is being a great diplomat about it. My prediction is that it won't be long before Sir Keir Starmer dyes his hair orange blonde and wears long red ties and does as he's told.
I hear the sarcasm there. I guess on the other side of that coin, how is our president received on the other side of the pond?
They love him. I mean, after after years of people, he doesn't behave in a way that the British find acceptable sometimes, and they really didn't like him. But now they see what he's doing, and many people just love it. Go, 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 they say.
But have you guys been following what's going on here with Elon Musk and Doge and the cuts and the questionable spending? I mean, is that top of news over there? Clearly, you all have your own problems, but is that something that your country's following?
Absolutely. I have been asked to speak on various television programs about why don't we have our own Musk and our own Doge here, because America looks tame in terms of waste compared to Britain. It's just unbelievable how much money we're wasting, and the Labour government, the new government here, is taking it to new heights. They're going to bankrupt everybody here to still do net zero when, that was yesterday's game.
Mm-hmm. Hey, let's talk about the idea of reciprocal tariffs. And for our viewers, that means basically President Trump is saying, hey, whatever we are charged, we're going to charge another country for imported goods and exported goods. So the president is saying that the prime minister, he tried to talk him out of the tariffs, and quoting now, working really hard, he says. He earned his money, I think is what the president said. But he does say that there's a real trade deal where the tariffs wouldn't be necessary. Your thoughts on
Correct. I'm sure there would be a trade deal that would equalize things.
Right.
And we are actually, very, very close partners and historically, and there wouldn't be need for tariffs. I mean, the tariffs are really the stick. And I think Trump would very much rather have the carrot. So I don't think that'll be hard for them to put together.
When it comes to Ukraine and Russia, it's pretty clear, you can read the tea leaves there, that President Trump and the Prime Minister feel differently about Vladimir Putin. In fact, in the Oval Office earlier today, before they met, they just so you know, the two leaders met in the Oval Office. There was a small gaggle with some of the members of the press, and then they met privately for about 2.5 hours. But in that first meeting, President Trump said with Putin, you have to trust and verify. And then just now we heard the prime minister say that there's a great deal of concern that, any peace deal must last. It almost sounds like the word is valid. Your thoughts there?
Well, a lot of people feel that way about the prime minister, I have to say. So, okay. Because he's doubled back and flip-flopped and moved the goalposts and changed things. We're not going to increase taxes, and then he's gone ahead and increased taxes and put many companies out of business, and a number of major household names have said that 650 million we were going to put in the UK, we ain't doing it now. So he's one to talk, I would say. I'm sorry I have to say that, but I think that this was a very polite and friendly goodwill meeting, but it's not reality. I mean, the real reality is that the rumors going around journalists yesterday afternoon here in the UK were that Starmer is going to take the money from the reductions in overseas aid that he announced in the middle of this week to increase Britain's defense spending, and instead use it on the Chagos Islands to give them to Mauritius, which is where our Diego Garcia Air Base, something that would make Trump absolutely explode, but Trump's not picking him up on these. So there's a lot more differences between these two gentlemen than we saw today in this presser.
Yeah, no, everything seems kind of buttoned up when you see them in front of the media, for sure. Let's talk about the significance of a second state visit, the invitation extended by the king. Both men seem to be making that, calling it a historic, unprecedented. Never before has it happened that a second state visit has been extended to somebody. Talk to us about the significance of that, and is that more about Donald Trump, or is that more about our country?
It's very much more about Trump and what he's doing and what he's going to do to America with his team. King Charles is doing, I think most people would say, a marvelous job of channeling and emulating his mother. He's gracious, he's kind, and he's been suffering with terrible cancer all this time as well. And it was just a brilliant move on his part to do that. I think that bodes very well. And of course, Trump and Her late Majesty did get on. They're chalk and cheese, but they got on very well. But Trump gets on with everybody. Anybody in his presence for 5 minutes is charmed usually. I think Charles made a very good move, and it bodes well. But the prime minister, I have to say, is almost in the Zelensky category. He doesn't really need to be at the meeting because Trump's going to do what he's going to do.
Let's double down on that, and I'd like to just get your frank opinion of what you feel the heartbeat is on the other side of the pond, because your prime minister says that, in saying this to Trump, quote, "You've created a moment of tremendous opportunity when it comes to negotiations between Russia and Ukraine." Do people over there feel like the United States is kind of leading these negotiations?
Sure, absolutely. And I think they're glad of it because they know that Prime Minister Starmer's idea of boots on the ground and pouring, we still have a terrible cost of living crisis here. And labor has raised taxes that literally have put so many businesses out of business and hurt so many households. And they're doing so many other socialist crazy things that nobody really wants. And so to keep pouring money into Ukraine for a war that more and more people here, I believe, feel cannot be won by Ukraine. Some are saying it's an ego trip by Zelensky. I wouldn't go that far, but they're very glad that Trump is taking control in all these different areas. They're very pleased that he's not an obfuscating politician like we've had for 14 years and now have on steroids. He's a businessman, and you may not like the way he puts it, or you may not even like what he's doing, but he does what he says.
Roger Giewald, thank you, sir, for taking the time to join us here on Dr. Phil's Merit TV. I want to turn now to our political director, Lindsay Keefe. She has made her way to the North Lawn of the White House there. Lindsay, your reaction after sitting through the news conference this afternoon?
Yeah, this was a very important meeting. Many in the UK saying one of the most consequential meetings between a British Prime Minister and a U.S. President since World War II, just to put this into context. And this really is all about, and was all about today, bolstering the relationship between Great Britain and the U.S. in order to protect greater Europe, as you were just talking about there. Really the key and the crux to this meeting today was security guarantees and a backstop that Europe is asking for collectively. We saw that from the Prime Minister, or the President rather, of France on Monday, and now the Prime Minister of the UK today, to ensure that Vladimir Putin does not invade Ukraine or other European nations. And you heard there from the Prime Minister saying that he is pleased with what was agreed to behind closed doors. The President not ceding much ground, really waiting to see what happens tomorrow. He announced that the meeting will happen tomorrow between Vladimir Zelensky of Ukraine and him at 11 a.m. tomorrow morning here at the White House, which will be critical because so far Zelensky has said that he is not going to sign this mineral deal that's on the table or a peace deal until he feels like there are security guarantees from the U.S. And that was one of the concerns from Starmer today. The Prime Minister ultimately saying without the U.S. and their military backing, that how can we be so confident that Putin would not invade Ukraine again? Because you have to look at it, Chris, really the U.S. since World War II, since NATO was created, for the last 80 years, the U.S. has been the backstop in Europe so that things like this didn't happen. And so everyone is eager to see peace, but what they're really concerned about is making sure that that peace is lasting, that Putin, who has been very clear about his intentions to reestablish the the Russian Empire, would not be able to do that and would not take a NATO country like Poland. And so that is much of the concern here. While there is great anticipation around the peace, there is also a pause to make sure that there is a lasting peace.
You know, Lindsay, you can't help but notice that when other foreign dignitaries come to the White House and they are asked about Putin, they all have the same reaction. We saw it with Mr. Macron earlier this week. We saw it with the Prime Minister just now. But we always get a different reaction with President Trump. Why the difference?
You know, I think it's interesting. He kind of alluded to that earlier today in the Oval Office, Chris, saying that actually during his first term, it was Russian. You remember the Russia hoax. And he said it was really Vladimir Putin who also carried a brunt of that in my first term. And he's always felt like he had a good relationship with Vladimir Putin, that the two men respected each other. And he feels like he's able to negotiate with him. You know, he has said time and time again, and even today, just in the East Room moments ago, that the war in between Russia and Ukraine that would have never happened, that Putin never would have invaded Ukraine. But that is the point that Starmer and so many other European allies are trying to make, just what Trump is saying. We need you because Putin will not invade if the U.S. is on our side, if they have someone strong like that. But President Trump says that he is confident that Putin will hold to this peace deal. And I think he believes a lot of that is because of his good standing relationship with Putin. But many of these other leaders know that he's a lame duck. Trump only has 4 years in the White House, and then no one knows who it will be after that. And so this is for a long lasting decades of peace they want in Europe, not just 4 years of peace. And so that is really why they are trying so earnestly to seek these guarantees from the U.S. that they would have their back if anything were to happen. And, you know, it's interesting coming into this meeting, France, as you know, and the UK have already promised to put peacekeepers on the ground, up to 30,000 troops in Ukraine if a peace deal is signed. But they're saying our military is not as strong as the U.S., so we need to know if something happens that you will protect our troops that we have on the ground. We're not asking for yours. We are just saying that you would give us air support or something of that matter. But it is, you know, the Prime Minister seemed very satisfied with their negotiation that they came to, but they didn't really let us to see much behind the curtain. I think they're waiting to see what happens tomorrow with these negotiations with Ukraine.
Well, I saw someone walk by with an umbrella. It sounds like the rain is coming down there. I know you're in the protected, at least for now, by that tent there, but I don't want to keep you too long. But I do have one final question when it comes to tariffs. Obviously, there is a lot of concern here stateside that how, you know, tariffs could potentially impact inflation, consumer spending, but the president really seems to feel like tariffs are kind of the way to do this idea of reciprocal tariffs, that we will pay out what other people are paying us for the exports and imports. The question I have is, today he being President Trump, he doubled down with the idea of China in his first 4 years in office. And he hearkened back on, well, what was the economy like back then? And did we see inflation? And did we see better consumer spending? What are the differences now at Trump 2.0 versus the tariffs that we saw during his first administration?
Yeah, it's actually a really great question, Chris. You know, President Trump used tariffs in his first term really on specific industries or to penalize different countries. And partly when it comes to China, it was to penalize them for certain things and for fentanyl. And this time around, he is really using tariffs as a broad economic plan to strengthen the U.S. And so, you know, he talks about these reciprocal tariffs that are going to go into place on April 2nd. That's because if you look at some of these other countries around the world and the tariffs they have on the U.S., they are much higher than the tariff that the U.S. has on exports that we give to them. So India, for instance, some of the tariffs on imports from India to the U.S. are 30%, 100% on some things. And you look at the exports from the U.S. to India, a lot of our tariffs on them are just 2%. And so the president's saying, well, this isn't fair. We have to lower our trade deficits. That's a word you often hear him use, a phrase. He wants to get to a fair trade deficit. And a lot of that he wants to use with these reciprocal tariffs to ensure that whatever you put on tariffs, we're going to put tariffs on you. And so So ultimately, this April 2nd deadline is for other countries to kind of get their ducks in a row to figure out if they want to keep the same tariff they have in place or if they want to lower that. And you heard him even saying just moments ago with Prime Minister Starmer that Starmer had asked him not to put tariffs on the UK, and he said he tried really hard and he did a great job. But he said there might be some kind of trade agreement. But really, this is the president's plan. We talk about getting the U.S. deficit down. You look at the amount of debt that we have in the U.S., over $36 trillion. He thinks that he can get over $1 trillion of that deficit down, maybe more, just through tariffs alone. He says he believes he can balance the budget through tariffs. So, you know, just to wrap this up, he believes that this is an economic plan, and before it was more of a targeted plan to bring different industries back to the U.S. So this is a much different plan, and you're going to hear this throughout his presidency as he continues to try to implement these.
All right, well, grab that umbrella. Safe travels back to the office. Our political director, Lindsay Keith, great job as always. For Lindsay Keith, I'm Chris Gutierrez. Please make sure you join us tonight for the news right here on Dr. Phil's Merit TV. We'll see you back here at 7 Eastern, 6 Central for the news tonight.
Separate your feet.
Got a little bit of ink, huh? How old are you?
23.